An emergency statement from Buckingham Palace just sent shockwaves through the monarchy. Queen Camilla has been stripped of all state duties, her public calendar wiped clean and transferred indefinitely to Princess Anne following an explosive financial audit scandal. Behind the gilded doors of the King private study, the air turned ice cold. Prince William walked in unannounced, his jaw set, and slammed a thick ledger onto his father's desk. The Prince of Wales laid out the cold truth. Camilla had secretly frozen public charity funds earmarked for Princess Anne while forging royal directives to divert those millions directly into her own private office. William looked straight into his father's eyes, offering no room for negotiation. "The crown integrity is not a bargaining chip for private ambition," he warned, his voice steady, lethal, and absolute. In the realm of British constitutional law, state duties represent the sovereign official power, encompassing ceremonial appearances, diplomatic receptions, and public patronage visits that legitimize the monarchy itself. Stripping a queen consort of these responsibilities is an unprecedented constitutional penalty, effectively erasing her public authority. Confronted with undeniable paper trails, King Charles III sat frozen. His hands trembled slightly as he picked up his pen. Under the watchful eyes of senior legal advisers, the monarch signed the executive decree, effectively banishing his own wife from public life to save the throne. It is a historic turning point, an heir apparent stepping in to dismantle a reigning queen apparatus. Yet, beneath the political victory lies a bitter family tragedy, leaving an aging king broken in total solitude. Was Prince William's ruthless intervention a necessary act of courage to protect the monarchy future, or an overreach of power against his father and stepmother? Leave a comment with number 1 if you support William, or number 2 if you believe the prince was far too cold-hearted. The quiet storm began 3 weeks earlier inside the high-ceilinged offices of St. James Palace. As chairman of the Royal Foundation, Prince William routinely oversaw the financial health of the monarchy primary charitable vehicle. It was meant to be a standard quarterly review, a mundane task of signing off on balance sheets and approving grants. Yet, as his eyes scanned the ledger pages under the soft desk lamp, his pulse quickened. Millions of pounds destined for long-term initiatives had vanished from the active roster, frozen without warning in the middle of a fiscal cycle. Among the affected accounts were flagship endeavors that formed the core of the prince's public legacy. Funds specifically allocated for global mental health outreach and environmental conservation programs suddenly showed a zero balance for the upcoming term. More troubling still was the complete freeze placed on several grassroots initiatives championed by Princess Anne. These were not speculative projects, they were established commitments, deeply tied to the public trust and the reputation of the crown. A financial audit within a royal institution is a rigorous process designed to maintain absolute transparency, requiring multiple layers of sign-offs from treasurers and board members. For an allocated grant to be halted, a formal administrative order must be filed with explicit justification. Yet no such documentation existed in the primary registry. The money had simply been locked in limbo, effectively paralyzing the operational reach of both the future king and the Princess Royal. Determined to trace the leak, William bypassed standard administrative channels and summoned a trusted team of forensic accountants. The paper trail they unearthed was subtle, disguised beneath layers of reallocated overhead costs and shifted management fees. But the ultimate destination of those funds was undeniable. Millions of pounds had been rerouted away from public welfare and quietly funneled into private trust accounts directly controlled by Queen Camilla private office. The mechanism behind the diversion was even more sinister than the theft itself. Tucked inside the transaction binders were official memorandum sheets carrying the prestigious crest of the monarch. Each document cited an urgent restructuring priority, ordering the immediate transfer of capital. Every single page bore a stark red stamp, indicating a direct instruction from the sovereign. However, a closer inspection revealed a damning anomaly. While the official royal stamp was prominently displayed, the signature line where King Charles III's personal initials should have rested was entirely blank. In their place was a stylized authorization mark belonging exclusively to the Queen Consort's senior private secretary. The authority of the monarch had been invoked, but the monarch himself had never put pen to paper. The realization settled over William with crushing weight. This was no administrative oversight or miscommunication among staff. It was a calculated, covert campaign designed to systematically hollow out the financial backing of the younger generation. By quietly choking off the resources that fueled William and Anne's most successful public campaigns, Camilla's private office was attempting to starve their influence, ensuring that the spotlight and financial prestige remained firmly anchored to the Queen Consort's own patronages. In the intricate machinery of the British royal family, public patronages are far more than charitable endeavors. They are the currency of royal relevance, the primary tool through which senior family members build public goodwill and demonstrate their utility to the nation. To sabotage another royal member patronage is to actively undermine their standing in the eyes of the public. Standing by the window overlooking the quiet courtyard, William held the heavily marked financial report in his trembling hands. Red ink lines crossed out vital project budgets, replaced by handwritten notes directing capital toward Camilla preferred charities. The betrayal cut deeper than mere politics. It was a direct exploitation of his father's trust, taking advantage of an aging king who believed his household was operating in harmony. Rather than confronting his father immediately or raising the alarm with palace officials, the Prince of Wales chose absolute discretion. He knew that a premature accusation would allow the Queen Consort advisors to cover their tracks or dismiss the incident as a clerical mistake. Instead, he quietly assembled an independent legal team, working out of a private firm outside the palace network to avoid any potential leaks. Day after day, the confidential file grew thicker. Bank statements, intercepted internal emails, and comparative budget reports were meticulously catalogued. Every piece of evidence was verified, leaving no room for denial or misinterpretation. William remained silent during public engagements, standing beside his family with a calm exterior while carrying a dossier that had the power to shatter the peace of the royal house. The trap was set, waiting for the precise moment to be sprung. Before confronting the king, William sought absolute alignment with the one person whose integrity inside the institution remained unquestioned. A private meeting was arranged at Gatcombe Park, far away from the listening walls of London. Princess Anne sat across from her nephew, her face growing colder with every page she turned. The ledger confirmed her worst suspicions. Key funding for her military veterans, organizations, and rural youth trusts had been systematically strangled, reduced to empty figures on a balance sheet. The Princess Royal did not raise her voice, but the sharpness in her eyes was unmistakable. For decades, Anne had built a reputation on unrelenting discipline and absolute loyalty to the crown, operating under the strict code that duty came before all personal sentiment. To discover that her work was being deliberately sabotaged for internal position was an intolerable offense. Aunt and nephew reached a silent, unbreakable consensus. Interfering with public funds and forging the authority of the sovereign crossed a sacred line. This was no longer a family disagreement over precedence. It was an assault on the constitutional integrity of the monarchy, and it could not be swept under the rug. Armed with Anne's complete backing, William traveled to Windsor Castle on a gray, overcast afternoon. He bypassed the main reception halls, taking the private corridors directly to the King's personal library. King Charles III sat near the fireplace, surrounded by stacks of state papers, looking weary under the weight of his royal duties. The atmosphere shifted instantly as the Prince of Wales entered, closing the heavy oak door behind him without a word. Without small talk, William unbuttoned his jacket and laid the black leather binder onto the wooden table between them. Page by page, he spread the evidence across the surface, displaying bank transfers, altered budget sheets, and the unauthorized royal stamps. He walked his father through the paper trail with surgical precision, showing how public money had been diverted and how royal authority had been fabricated behind the monarch's back. The Privy Council is a formal body of senior advisors to the sovereign, dating back centuries, responsible for advising the monarch on the exercise of the royal prerogative and constitutional matters. Laying an internal financial scandal before this council meant elevating a private royal dispute into an official, irreversible state matter, dragging the inner workings of the palace into formal scrutiny. For several minutes, the room fell into a suffocating silence. King Charles III stared at the documents, his eyes fixated on his own name, stamped across directives he had never seen. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The woman who had stood beside him through decades of public scorn, the partner he had fought so fiercely to crown as queen, had used his authority behind his back to wage a quiet war against his own sister and son. A mixture of disbelief and deep humiliation washed over the aging king face, his hands resting motionless on the table. William stepped closer, his shadow falling over the spread pages. His voice was low, icy, and devoid of emotion. He issued a final, non-negotiable ultimatum. If the king refused to take immediate internal action and strip Camilla of her official public duties, William would personally hand the entire forensic dossier over to the Privy Council for an independent investigation. He made it clear that he would not stand by while the institution he was born to inherit was quietly corrupted from within. Charles looked up at his heir, his expression torn between paternal sorrow and kingly distress. He attempted to plead for patience, suggesting an internal review or a quiet reallocation of the funds without public scandal. But William cut through the hesitation with uncompromising clarity. Silence and compromise were no longer options. The prince reminded his father that protecting a marriage at the expense of institutional integrity would make Charles an accomplice after the fact. Public trust in the new reign was already fragile, held together by the promise of transparency and selfless service. If the public or Parliament discovered that the king had shielded his wife after she forged his royal authority, the damage to the crown would be catastrophic and permanent. The choice presented to the king was brutal and absolute. He could act as a sovereign and uphold the law of his house, or he could act as a protective husband and risk burning down the very throne he had waited a lifetime to inherit. As the clock in the library chimed the hour, Charles sat motionless in his chair, staring at the ultimatum on the table, realizing that the quiet authority of his reign had just passed into the hands of his son. The summons arrived at Clarence House without warning. Queen Camilla entered the king's private study, expecting a quiet evening conversation, but the heavy silence hanging in the room signaled a trap. Standing by the marble fireplace was Prince William, his tall frame rigid, his hands resting over the black audit dossier that lay open on the central mahogany table. Between father and son sat a single sheet of paper bearing the royal seal, freshly drafted and waiting for a signature. Camilla paused at the threshold, her eyes darting between the cold, unyielding gaze of her stepson and the pale, drawn face of her husband. Sensing the ambush, she moved quickly to seize control of the narrative. Walking toward the desk, her tone was soft, almost maternal, as she dismissed the thick stack of financial ledgers as a mere administrative misunderstanding. She argued smoothly that her office had simply been securing the necessary financial backing required to maintain the queen consort public dignity. The sovereign household, she insisted, needed to project strength and grandeur at the center of the reign, requiring resources that matched the heavy demands of her expanding role. Before the king could speak, William stepped forward, cutting through her polished defense with razor-sharp precision. His voice was quiet, devoid of passion, yet laced with absolute authority. He pointed directly to the red ink stamps on the comparative audit sheets. This was not a dispute over household allocations, he reminded her. It was a systematic theft of public charity funds, executed by forging royal directives and falsely invoking the king name without his knowledge. William made it painfully clear that using the sovereign authority to quietly strip resources from Princess Anne and the Prince of Wales was a catastrophic breach of royal ethics and institutional discipline. Cornered by the irrefutable paper trail, Camilla's demeanor shifted from defensive charm to sharp defiance. Her cheeks flushed with anger as she turned her focus away from the financial records and launched a direct attack against the Prince of Wales. She accused William of orchestrating a cold, calculated coup, seizing on a minor clerical oversight to systematically isolate her within the palace walls. She claimed he was playing a dangerous game of early succession, flexing his muscle as the heir apparent to humiliate his father, wife, and consolidate absolute control over the monarchy before his time. William did not flinch, nor did he raise his voice. He stood immovable, his eyes locking onto hers with an icy composure that only heightened the tension in the room. He rejected her accusations with absolute detachment. This was never about personal rivalry or his future throne, he told her. It was about the survival of the institution itself. The public trust in the modern crown rested entirely on accountability, transparency, and selfless service. The moment the royal family allowed fraud, favoritism, and the abuse of power to fester behind closed doors, the moral authority of the monarchy would crumble instantly in the eyes of the nation. An executive decree within the royal household functions as an absolute royal command, carrying the full legal weight of the sovereign prerogative to appoint, suspend, or permanently strip a royal figure of their official duties and public status. Executing such a decree against a sitting queen consort is an extraordinary action, one that permanently redefines the power structure of the court. King Charles III sat in total silence, his head resting in his hands as the sharp exchange echoed around the library. Finally, the monarch lifted his head, his face aged by the crushing weight of the moment. He looked at his wife, his voice trembling slightly as he asked the one question that mattered. He asked Camilla directly whether she had known that his personal authorization mark had been fabricated to bypass his own signature and lock away public funds. A suffocating silence descended upon the study. Camilla opened her mouth as if to offer another defense, but under the relentless gaze of both king and prince, no words came out. Her inability to deny the core accusation spoke louder than any confession. The silence stretched, heavy and undeniable, sealing her fate. Watching his wife fall silent, the last lingering trace of hesitation vanished from the king's eyes. The painful reality settled in. His trust had been manipulated, and his authority borrowed to fight a private war. Reaching slowly across the desk, King Charles III picked up his fountain pen. With a steady, deliberate hand, the monarch signed the executive decree lying before him, officially suspending Queen Camilla from all public state duties and severing her office from the machinery of the crown. Before the ink on the executive decree had even dried, the machinery of the court began to shift with cold, bureaucratic efficiency. Prince William did not leave the execution of the order to palace staff. Instead, he personally established a special oversight committee comprised of trusted legal officers and senior treasurers to manage the complete stripping of Queen Camilla public authority. By dawn, team members entered her private offices at Clarence House, methodically collecting confidential diplomatic briefing papers, classified foreign ministry files, and state reception schedules that had belonged to her office. Every official engagement carrying Camilla's name was systematically purged from the court circular, the official daily record of royal engagements. International tours, state banquets, and high-profile charity galas were instantly erased or reassigned. Behind closed doors, the human cost of the audit unfolded. Camilla's most loyal private secretaries and advisors were served with immediate administrative suspension. They were given 24 hours to account for missing funds and unauthorized signatures, with those unable to clear their names facing quiet dismissal or transfer to distant, low-level administrative posts far from the center of power. To prevent a total collapse of the royal schedule, William worked side by side with Princess Anne in a series of emergency planning sessions. Together, they meticulously reorganized the entire national calendar. Princess Anne, known for her unmatched work ethic and flawless discipline, stepped into the breach without hesitation. State receptions, diplomatic luncheons, and patronage visits, previously led by the Queen Consort, were integrated seamlessly into Anne's expanded roster. International delegations and foreign diplomats were quietly reassured that the Crown obligations would proceed without a single moment of disruption. The court circular serves as the authoritative public record of the British monarchy, documenting every official duty, performed by members of the royal family. Inclusion in this historic record is the ultimate proof of a royal figure, official service, and public legitimacy, making the removal of one name a powerful statement of institutional exclusion. Controlling the narrative was critical to preventing a full-scale constitutional panic. William issued a strict, non-negotiable directive to the Buckingham Palace Communications Department. All public messaging was to be kept strictly professional and devoid of personal drama. The press office was instructed to frame the sweeping changes as a strategic, modern restructuring aimed at streamlining the monarchy, reducing overhead costs, and maximizing public efficiency. Not a single word regarding internal investigations, financial audits, or family rift was permitted to breach the palace walls. Inside her private apartments, Camilla found herself wrapped in a suffocating silence. The loss of her official duties was not merely a change in her schedule. It was the total destruction of her public identity. Her phones stopped ringing, her advisors were gone, and her access to internal palace communications was revoked. The private secretaries who once managed her daily life had been replaced by auditors. Every financial channel, media outlet, and administrative lever she had spent decades cultivating was now completely blocked by the Prince of Wales. She was left isolated, a queen in name only, watching the daily operations of the monarchy move forward smoothly without her. Watching the cold precision with which his heir managed the crisis, King Charles III fell into a state of profound emotional exhaustion. The monarch spent long hours alone in his study, surrounded by the quiet echoes of a diminished household. He loved his wife deeply, yet he could not deny the devastating reality of the evidence or the absolute necessity of William's actions. In those quiet, painful days, the aging king came to a bittersweet realization. The real authority required to govern the House of Windsor no longer rested in his hands. Queen Camilla had officially passed to his eldest son, a future king who had proven he possessed the ruthless resolve needed to protect the crown at any cost. The quiet storm began 3 weeks earlier inside the high-ceilinged offices of St. James Palace. As chairman of the Royal Foundation, Prince William routinely oversaw the financial health of the primary charitable organization of the monarchy. It was meant to be a standard quarterly review, a routine task of signing off on balance sheets and approving routine operational grants. Yet, as his eyes scanned the ledger pages under the soft glow of his desk lamp, his pulse quickened. Millions of pounds destined for major long-term initiatives had vanished from the active roster, frozen, without warning, in the middle of a fiscal cycle. Among the affected accounts were flagship endeavors that formed the absolute core of the prince's public legacy. Funds specifically allocated for global mental health outreach and environmental conservation programs suddenly showed a zero balance for the upcoming term. More troubling still was the complete freeze placed on several grassroots initiatives championed by Princess Anne. These were not speculative projects. They were established commitments, deeply tied to the public trust and the reputation of the crown across the realm. In the machinery of British royal governance, a financial audit within a major charitable foundation is a rigorous process designed to maintain absolute transparency. It requires multiple layers of verification from legal trustees, treasurers, and independent board members. For an allocated grant to be halted or withdrawn, a formal administrative order must be filed with explicit justification and documented approval from the board. Yet no such documentation existed in the primary registry. The money had simply been locked in limbo, effectively paralyzing the operational reach of both the future king and the Princess Royal. Determined to trace the leak, William bypassed standard administrative channels and summoned a trusted team of forensic accountants to conduct a secret internal review. The paper trail they unearthed was subtle, disguised beneath layers of reallocated overhead costs, shifted management fees, and complex inter-office transfers. But the ultimate destination of those funds was undeniable. Millions of pounds had been rerouted away from public welfare and quietly funneled into private trust accounts directly controlled by Queen Camilla private office. The mechanism behind the diversion was even more alarming than the missing funds themselves. Tucked inside the confidential transaction binders were official memorandum sheets carrying the prestigious crest of the monarch. Each document cited an urgent restructuring priority, ordering the immediate transfer of capital away from active projects. Every single page bore a stark red stamp indicating a direct instruction from the sovereign. However, a closer inspection revealed a damning anomaly that made William's blood run cold. While the official royal stamp was prominently displayed at the top, the signature line where King Charles III's personal initials should have rested was entirely blank. In their place was a stylized authorization mark belonging exclusively to the Queen Consort's senior private secretary. The authority of the monarch had been invoked, but the monarch himself had never put pen to paper. The realization settled over William with crushing weight as he stood alone in the quiet office. This was no administrative oversight or accidental miscommunication among palace staff. It was a calculated, covert campaign designed to systematically hollow out the financial backing of the younger generation. By quietly choking off the resources that fueled William and Anne's most successful public campaigns, Camilla's private office was attempting to starve their influence, ensuring that the spotlight and financial prestige remained firmly anchored to the Queen Consort's own patronages. In the intricate framework of the royal household, public patronages are far more than simple charitable endeavors. They represent the primary currency of royal relevance, serving as the official mechanism through which senior family members build public goodwill and demonstrate their ongoing utility to the nation. To sabotage another royal member patronage is to actively undermine their standing in the eyes of the public and chip away at their constitutional purpose. Standing by the window overlooking the quiet stone courtyard, William held the heavily marked financial report in his hands. Red ink lines crossed out vital project budgets, replaced by handwritten notes directing capital toward Camilla-preferred charities. The betrayal cut deeper than mere court politics. It was a direct exploitation of his father's trust, taking advantage of an aging king who genuinely believed his household was operating in total harmony. Rather than confronting his father immediately or raising the alarm with palace officials, the Prince of Wales chose absolute discretion. He knew that a premature accusation would allow the Queen Consort advisors to cover their tracks, destroy digital records, or dismiss the incident as a simple clerical mistake. Instead, he quietly assembled an independent legal team, working out of a private firm outside the palace network, to avoid any potential leaks from court insiders. Day after day, the confidential file grew thicker. Bank statements, intercepted internal emails, and comparative budget reports were meticulously catalogued and verified. Every single piece of evidence was cross-checked against palace protocol, leaving no room for denial or misinterpretation. William remained silent during public engagements, standing beside his family with a calm exterior while carrying a dossier that had the power to shatter the peace of the royal house. The trap was set, waiting for the precise moment to be sprung. This high-stakes chapter in royal history leaves an undeniable truth written across the gates of the palace. True authority within the monarchy does not spring from a golden crown, an exalted title, or centuries of tradition. It rests entirely on the unyielding courage to uphold constitutional principles, even when doing so demands the ultimate sacrifice of personal family peace. By stepping into the breach to enforce accountability, the Prince of Wales proved that the survival of the House of Windsor will always supersede individual ambition or court politics. As the dust settles over the quiet corridors of Buckingham Palace, the defining image of this new era comes into sharp focus. Standing shoulder to shoulder beside an aging King Charles III during a grand state ceremony, Prince William projects an aura of ironclad stability. Though King Charles III still wears the crown, the unspoken transfer of real power is officially complete. The reign has shifted into the hands of a resolute heir, a future king who has demonstrated he possesses the cold determination required to safeguard the throne against any threat, internal or external. How will the quiet removal of Queen Camilla and the formidable rise of Prince William reshape the future face of the British monarchy? Will this decisive act restore public trust in the crown, or has it planted the seeds of an unhealable fracture within the royal family? Share your thoughts and perspectives in the comment section below. If you found this deep dive insightful, please hit the subscribe button and tap the notification bell right now so you never miss our upcoming exclusive analysis and behind-the-scenes stories. Thank you so much for watching, goodbye, and we will see you in the next video.